Okay, so if you're in my class, you'll have all of these steps. I'm just going to work some problems with you, but you'll have these on the handout if you're actually in my class that you can refer back to so that you can figure out a little bit more about it. So what we're going to do is we are factoring trinomials. And we are going to use what is called the AC method. So we're looking at equations that have ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the format we're going to factor. And the first thing we want to do is always check for a GCF. Remember that GCF is the greatest common factor. So you want to check for the greatest common factor first on any of the problems to make sure it doesn't simplify down anymore. All right, so here is our AC method. So our first problem is 2x squared plus 11x plus 15. So I'm going to check for a GCF first. A 2, an 11, and a 15, there's nothing in common there to factor, and this term is the only one that has a variable. So there is no GCF that we can do. So then we're going to do the AC method part. So for the AC method, you take A times C and you find the B. So our A is 2, looking at our equation up there. So 2 times our C is, which is 15. 2 times 15 will get us 30. And the B is an 11. The signs are important. On this one, we only have positive signs. We don't have to worry about the signs. But we'll discuss those as we go. All right, so now I'm looking for factors of 30 to get to 11. So I always start with 1 in 30, or the 1 in the whatever that number is, because that way I can make sure all my signs are good. But in this case, we only had positive signs. 1 times 30 is 30. When I add them, I get 1 plus 30 is 31. It is not the number I'm looking for, but it is a positive number, so I'm good on my sign. 30 divides by 2. 2 times 15 is 30. When I add them, I get 17. Not the right number, but I'm getting closer to 11 than I started with. 30 divides by 3. 3 times 10 is 30. When I add them, I get 13. Still not to 11, but I'm getting closer. 30 does not divide by 4, but it divides by 5. 5 times 6 is 30, and when I add them, I get the 11. So that's the number we're looking for. So these will be the two numbers we're going to use to rewrite 11 as 5x and 6x. So we're going to come up here and we're going to rewrite the terms. So we'll still have 2x squared, but instead of 11x, we're going to write it as 5x plus 6x, because they're both positive, plus our 15. So we just rewrote the 11x as 5x and 6x. And there we go. All right, now we are going to split. We're back to factor by grouping, which we covered in the last video. So we've got 4 terms. We split it in half. The first 2 terms only have an x in common. And we end up with 2x plus 5 when we divide those out. So between those two, they only have an x that are in common. That's our GCF. We bring out the 2, the x that's left over, and the 5. Bring down the sign. And between 6x and 15, they have a common factor of 3. 6x divided by 3 will leave me with 2x. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Notice, just like we did in factor by grouping, the parentheses match. If they match, you did it right. If they don't match, you need to go back and see what you did incorrectly. So our GCF is 2x plus 5, And when we factor that out, we have an x. We factor this out, we have the 3. And that's our answer right there. All right, let's go do another problem. So if we have 3x squared minus x minus 4. Again, we look for a GCF to begin with, but it doesn't have one. Now we're going to go do the AC part. A times C getting you to B. So 3 times negative 4. And here, this is, you don't see a number, but it's going to be a 1. So this is going to be negative 1 over here. 3 times negative 4 will get us negative 12. So we've got a negative 12. We're trying to get to a negative 1. So again, I'm going to start with 1 and my number so I can figure out my signs. I know that I need to have one of these numbers be negative, and because I have to get a negative 12, and I need it to be the bigger number because when I add them, I need the bigger number to be negative, so I get a negative answer. So positive 1 times negative 12 gets me negative 12. When I add them together, so 12 minus 1 will get us 11, and it'll be negative because my 12 is the bigger number of the two with the negative sign on it. All right, that's not the right number I'm looking for, but it is the correct sign. And that's what I do with the first one, with the 1 and whatever number, I can get the signs right. All right, now 12 divides by 2, so 2 times negative 6 will get me negative 12. When I add those together, I get negative 4. Not the right number, but I'm getting closer. 12 divides by 3, so 3 times negative 4 gets me negative 12. When I add them, there's the negative 1 I'm looking for. So now I will come up here again and rewrite that second term. First term stays the same, but negative 1 is now written as positive 3 and negative 4. So I will have a positive 3x and a negative 4x, and then our minus 4. So I'm just using those two numbers to rewrite the original term. Now I have 4 terms, so factor by grouping. On this first half here, I have a common factor of 3 and a common factor of x. That will leave me with an x plus 1. Bring down the sign, whatever it is right here. Last time we had a positive sign that came down. This time we'll have a negative sign. They have a factor of 4. So negative 4x divided by negative 4 will leave me with x. And negative 4 divided by negative 4 will be a 1. Let's say we did not pay attention to the signs and we put x minus 1. Do they match? They don't, so I'd have to come back up. They're close. Back up here and go, okay, it's negative 4 divided negative 4. That gets us a positive 1. So be careful about your signage. All right, the parentheses match, so we did the problem correctly. We bring down our x plus 1. That's our greatest common factor, and we're left with the 3x and the minus 4 when we factor that out. All right, let's go do another problem. So for our next problem, we have x squared plus 10x plus 16. Again, they don't have anything in common to start with. We start our a times c, getting us to b. This time our a, there is no number sitting there, so we know it's a 1, times our c, which is 16. That gets us a 16, and we're trying to get to the b of 10. Everybody's positive again this time, so we're happy about that. All right, so start with 1 and 16. 1 times 16 is 16. When we add them, we get to 17. Not the number, but the signs are all positive, so we're good on that. 16 divides by 2. 2 times 8 is 16. Oh, when I add them, I get to the 10 I'm looking for. All right, so now we're going to rewrite our number 10 as 2 and 8. So x squared plus 2x plus 8x plus 16. Again, 4 terms, we'll split it in half, factor by grouping, factor out an x, and we get an x plus 2. Bring down our sign. Between 8 and 16, we can factor out an 8, and we're left with an x plus 2. And do they match? They do. So here we have our factor of x plus 2, and we get our left over parts there when we factor those out, our x plus 8. Now, you may notice, hey, those are the same numbers. When you have a 1 out front, when you factor, it will become those. So when there's just a 1 out front, you don't have to do all of this. These will become your x plus 2 and your x plus 8. But that only happens when there's a 1. Notice on the previous ones, we did not get the same numbers that we found. Because here they have something other than a 1 up front. We started with a 2 here and a 3 here. So these numbers will not work straight in. It only happens when you have a 1 in the front of it. So you could go straight to the term. We'll do another one of these and you'll see that. That is going to happen each time there's just a 1 in front of our x squared. All right, so here is x squared minus 12x plus 35. Again, no common factor there. So we have our a times c trying to get to b. A is 1, c is 35. So 1 times 35 will get us 35, and we're trying to get to a negative 12. So again, we'll start with 1 times 35 gets us 35, but I have to get a negative over here. But I have to get a positive, so that tells me that both signs have to be negative. Because a negative times a negative will get us a positive, and when I add them, I will get the negative I'm looking for. So when I add them, I get a negative 36. Not the right number, but I've gotten the sign correct, and that's the important part on that first one. 35 does not divide by 2, it doesn't divide by 3, it doesn't divide by 4, it divides by 5. So negative 5 times negative 7 gets me 35, and when I add them, oh, I got my negative 12. So now I will rewrite that negative 12x as negative 5, negative 7. So x squared minus 5x minus 7x plus 35. Factor by grouping. In the beginning half there, we have just an x in common. So x times x minus 5 is what we are left with. Bring down the minus sign. 7x and 35, they have a common factor of 7. And we end up with x. Now pay attention, it's 35 divided by negative 7. It will be negative 5, not positive 5. And they match. Do our factoring. We have x minus 5. When we factor those out, we have an x minus 7 left. Now notice again, we got the same numbers. That is because there's a 1 in front. Only when the a is a 1 do they match that way. So you could again skip those two once you do this part and you get to that answer. But that only counts when there's a 1 up front and not when there's not. All right. So let's do another example. We have 2x squared minus 7x minus 15. All right, not a common GCF yet, so we're going to still do a times c, getting us to b. This time our a is a 2, our c is a negative 15. So 2 times negative 15 will get us negative 30. and we're trying to get to a negative 7. So again, I'm going to start with 1 and 30. This time I have a negative for both, so that tells me that my biggest number has to be negative, so that when I add them, I will get a negative number. So 1 times negative 30 is negative 30. When I add them, I get negative 29. Not the right answer, but I have my sign right. 30 divides by 2. So 2 times negative 15 will get me negative 30. When I add them, I get negative 13. Getting closer. 3 times negative 10 is negative 30, and when I add them, there's my negative 7. All right, so now I'm going to go rewrite my negative 7 as positive 3, negative 10. Don't forget your x's on those. So 2x squared plus 3x minus 10x minus 15. Now it doesn't matter. I could put the negative 10x and then the 3x. I just usually go straight off. And I always put the bigger number on this side so I can match my signs. All right, we're down to 4 terms. Actually, we're up to 4 terms, so we're going to factor by grouping. This has an x in common, and we end up with 2x plus 3. And then we factor out the negative right there because that's a negative on that, so the sign. And between a 10 and a 15, 10 and 15, they're going to have a factor of 5. So negative 10 divided by negative 5 will get us positive 2 with the x. Negative 15 divided by negative 5 is a positive 3. And our parentheses match. So that gives us 2x plus 3 is our common factor. That'll leave us with an x and a negative 5. So again, we didn't have a 2, so you'll notice these numbers don't match here like they did on the previous. And that's because there's not a 1 out front. All right, let's go do another one. So here we have an x squared minus 11x plus 24. Now we have the 1 out front this time, so let's watch and see if we end up with the same numbers that we come up with on the AC getting to B part. A times C, getting us to B. My A is 1, my C is 24, so that gets me positive 24, and I'm trying to get to a negative 11. So I have a positive, trying to get to a negative. That means both of my numbers will have to be negative. So 1 times 24 gets me 24, but to get that negative sign, they'll both have to be negative in this case because I have a positive and a negative. Last time, we had a negative to a negative, so only one of the numbers was negative. So pay attention to that. Here we had a positive with a negative, so they're both negative. So when they're both negative, only one will have to be negative, and that'll be the bigger number. But again, we have a positive to a negative. So double negative over here, when I add them, I get negative 25. Not the right number, but I got the right sign. 24 divides by 2, so negative 2 times negative 12 gives me positive 24. When I add them, I get negative 14. I'm getting closer. 24 divides by 3. Negative 3 times negative 8 will be negative or positive 24. When I add them, I get negative 11. That's the number I'm looking for. So I will come up and rewrite. So x squared minus 3x minus 8x plus 24. 4 terms, I factor by grouping. Between here and here, the x squared and the 3x, I can factor out an x, and I'm left with x minus 3. Break down the negative sign between 8 and 24. I factor out an 8, and I'm left with x, and 24 divided by negative 8 will get me a negative 3. They match. So I have x minus 3, and that leaves me with x minus 8. Oh, and looky there, the numbers matched again because our a was a 1. All right, let's look at the next problem. So here we have 5x cubed minus 30x squared minus 35x. Okay, let's see, do we have a GCF this time? 5, 30, 35. Well, those are all divisible by 5. And x cubed, x squared, x. So this time I have a GCF of 5x because they all have those in common. So 5 divided by 5 will leave us with a 1. X cubed divided by x, that'll get me x squared. Negative 30 divided by 5 will get me a negative 6. X squared divided by x will get me an x. Negative 35 divided by 7, or 5 will get me a 7. And the x's will cancel out. So now I'm factoring this part right here. Now understand, you have to keep that 5x coming on down. So I'm doing my AC method here. I have a times c trying to get to b. So I'm not worried about the 5x at this point. My a is 1. My c is negative 7. So 1 times negative 7 is negative 7. And my b is negative 6. So start with 1 and 7. Who's going to be, they're both negative, so one of the numbers will be negative to get my negative over here. It has to be the bigger one because I'm trying to get the number to be a negative. So 1 times negative 7 gets me negative 7. When I add them, I get to negative 6. Oh, nice, we're already there. So again, we now have a 1 out front, so we could go straight to our answer. It should end up being x plus 1, x minus 7. But let's go see if we get that answer. So we're still going to rewrite this. I'm going to, so we'll have x squared plus 1x, and you can just write x if you want to, and then minus 7x minus 7. Again, I'm still going to factor by grouping. I'm going to do brackets from these parentheses since we're going to have some other parentheses in here. It makes it a little bit easier. And you could go ahead and write these as brackets if you want to start with, because we're going to do some other parentheses coming up. Between x squared and x, I can factor out an x, and I end up with x plus 1. Bring down my negative sign. Between 7x and 7, I factor out a 7, and I'm left with x plus 1 again. My parentheses matched, so now I'm going to have 5x times my x plus 1, and then when I factor out the x plus 1s, I'm left with my x minus 7. Oh, notice, we got our x plus 1 and our x minus 7. So again, when it had a 1 out front, after we factored out, we get what we find. All right. Let's go to another one. So let me just point out, what you could have done is once you get, let's just rewrite this over here. So we had 5x times x squared minus 6x minus 7. If you're understanding the concept of the 1 out front, what we could have done, once we found our factors, instead of doing these 3 steps, like I said, we can skip those. We could go, oh, there is a 1 in the front of my x squared, so I can just write this as x plus 1, x minus 7, knowing that I had a 1 out front for my a. So if you understand that concept, you do not have to write all of this out. You can do this. But let me clarify again. It only happens when the a is a 1. Any other time, it will not work. All right, so let's go do another problem. And if you don't see it, it's okay. You can work all the steps and it's all good. You'll get to the same answer. So 3x cubed minus 9x squared minus 30x. So again, we're looking for a GCF. Between a 3, a 9, and a 30, they all divide by 3, and they all have an x, with our lowest exponent of being x to the first. So this will leave us with an x squared. Negative 9 divided by 3 will get us negative 3. X squared divided by x will leave us with 1x. Negative 30 divided by 3 would be get us a negative 10, and our x's will cancel. So now we are back again to where we're doing the AC part. So A times C getting us to B. So with my A being a 1 and my C being a negative 10, trying to get to a negative 3. All right, now my AC, I have a 1, so I know that the whatever I figure out over here should go straight to it. So negative 10, trying to get to negative 3. So let's start with 1 and negative 10. That gets me a negative when I multiply, and when I add them, I get negative 9. So my signs are correct. So 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. When I add them, I get to negative 3. That's what I'm looking for. So if I'm understanding what I'm talking about with the 1 in front of the x squared, I know that my answer over here should end up being that 3x we have out front, x plus 2, x minus 5. This is the answer. If I understand when there's a 1 out front, I can get to this answer. So let's go see if it works. All right, so 3x, we're going to do the bracket thing. X squared, instead of negative 3x, we're going to have positive 2x, negative 5x, negative 10. All right, factor by grouping. So we have our 3x. Over on the first half, we can factor out an x, and we get x plus 2. Bring out the negative sign. They both have a 5 in common between 5x and 10, or negative 10. So bring out the 5. Negative 5x divided by negative 5 will be x. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 would be positive 2. And they match. So we end up with 3x times x plus 2, and then x minus 5 is left. And looky there, I got to the same answer. Only happens once you have that GCF out if you have a 1 out front. Otherwise, it will not work. All right. So let's go look at our next example. We have 12x cubed y minus 22x squared y plus 8xy. So we're looking to find our GCF. These are all even, so I know that they'll divide by 2, and 22 will only divide by 2 and 11. So I can't go any further than 2. They all have an x term, and they all have a y term. So my GCF will be 2. My lowest exponent is x to the first and y to the first. 12 divided by 2 would get me 6. X cubed divided by x will get me x squared, and the y's would cancel. Minus 22 divided by 2 would be 11. X squared divided by x gets me an x, and the y's would cancel. 8 divided by 2 is 4. My x would cancel, and the y would. So this one, I do not have a 1 up front, so I cannot go straight to that answer when I figure out the AC part. So A times C getting us to B. We have a 6 times a 4, trying to get to negative 11. So we have a positive 24 trying to reach negative 11. So starting with 1 and 24, I know that they both have to be negative. so that I get a positive multiplication and a negative answer. And I get negative 25 over here. Not the right number, but it is the right sign. So negative 2 times negative 12 gets me positive 24. I get negative 14 when I add them. Negative 3 times negative 8, I get positive 24. And when I add them, I get negative 11. That's the number I'm looking for. All right, so we have 2xy bracket 6x squared minus 3x minus 8x plus 4. And now I'll factor by grouping. We cannot go straight to the answer this time because we have something other than 1 out front. 2xy, between a 6x squared and a 3x, we can factor out a 3x, and we end up with 2x minus 1. Bring down our sign. 8x plus 4 means we can factor out a 4 between those two, and we end up with 2x minus 1. Did we have the right? Yes, we do. We did it right because our parentheses match again. So now we have 2xy, factor out our common factor of 2x minus 1, and then when we factor those out, we're left with 3x minus 4. Notice these numbers don't match what's over here because there was not a 1 out front. All right, let's do another one. So we have 16x squared plus 24xy plus 9y squared. All right. So, looking again for a GCF. Do we have a GCF here? Well, we have a 16, a 24, and a 9. 9 is not an even number. It only divides by 3. The 24 does, but the 16 doesn't. So there is no number. These two have an x, these two have a y. So there's no variable either. So we are just starting into our AC method. So A times C, trying to get us to B. So this time we're going to have some big numbers. We're going to have 16 times 9, trying to get to 24. 16 times 9 is 144. So big numbers, but it's okay, we can do this. They're all positive, so 1 times 144 gets me positive 144. When I add them, I get to 145. All right, let's go to 2. 2 times 72 will get me 144. When I add it, I get to 74. Not to 24 yet, but we're getting closer, and we are heading in the right direction. 144 divides by 3, and you can use a calculator to do this part. 3 times 48 is 144. When I add it, I get to, let's see, 48, 51. 4 goes in there. 4 times 36 is 144. When I add it, I get to 40. It won't divide by 5, but it divides by 6. 6 times 24 is 144. When I add that, I get 30. It won't divide by 7, but 8 times 18 is 144. When I add it, I get to 26. Oh, I'm getting closer. 9 goes into it. 9 times 16 gets you 144. When you add it, you get 25. It doesn't divide by 10, it doesn't divide by 11, but 12 times 12 is 144, and I get to 24. Now, if you knew, looking at it, like, hey, 12 and 12, you don't have to do all of these steps. But I do that so you see, you just work a method that will help you know if there was an issue where one of them's not going to work. All right, so now I'm going to come up and rewrite. So 16x squared plus 12xy plus 12xy plus 9y squared. And don't forget you have two variables there. Split it in half. So 16 and 12, we're looking at what we can factor out. That will be a 4. We can also factor out an x. So 4x will leave me with a 4x here. 12 divided by 4 will get us 3. The x will cancel, and we're left with a y. Bring down my plus sign between 12 and 9. I can factor out a 3, and I can also factor out a y. 12 divided by 3 will get us 4. X, the y will cancel. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Y squared divided by y will get us y. And look, our parentheses match. So we did it correctly. Factor out the 4x plus 3y times the 4x plus 3y. Because we factored that out, and then they match. Notice that these match, they're exactly the same. You could rewrite this as 4x plus 3y quantity squared. You would not need to do that for me, but you could do it. Alrighty. So now we are looking at another problem. Let's look at 6x squared plus 13x plus 8. No GCF there, 13 is a prime number. So A times C trying to get us to B. So 6 times 8 is 48, trying to get to our 13. So we'll start with 1 and 48. With 1 and 48, when we add it, we get to 49. 2 and 24, 2 times 24 is 48. When I add it, I get to 26. 3 times 16 gets me 48. When I add it, I get to 19. 4 times 12 is 48. When I add, I get to 16. So I'm getting closer. 48 doesn't divide by 5, but it does divide by 6. 6 times 8 is 48. When I add, I get to 14. 48 does not divide by 7. The next number would be 8. It would be 8 times 6, but we already have 6 times 8. Notice we can't get to 13. That makes this prime. And this is why it's non-factorable. So that would be another way, is not factorable. So this is why I like to go in a numerical order, so I don't go, well, was it prime? If I go in an order, then I know whether or not I missed any numbers or anything. So this one's not factorable, and that will happen sometimes. All right. And then let's do by substitution. I'm not sure if any of this will be in your homework, but sometimes we need to know how to do this one. Alrighty, so if we have x plus 4 squared minus 5 times x plus 4 minus 36. What I can do, I don't want to multiply all of this out because that would be craziness. So I'm going to notice that this is like an x squared, a negative 5x, and a negative 36. I don't want to use x because it's already in there. So I'm going to say that y is equal to my x plus 4. So this will get me y squared minus 5y minus 36. So I've just substituted y as that to make it a little bit easier. And so you notice if that's the y, so it's just in there and it keeps the exponent of the squared. All right, so let's do our AC, getting us to B. We have a 1 times a negative 36, trying to get to a negative 5. So 1 and 36, the 36 will be the negative one because I'm trying to get to a negative. If the 5 was positive, I would put the negative on the 1. I notice as I'm working these, I don't have any that have that. But if this one's positive and we have a negative, the negative will go on the smaller number on the 1. All right, so when we add those, we get to negative 35. 2 times negative 18 gets me negative 36. When I add them, I get negative 16. 3 times negative 12 gets me negative 36. When I add them, I get negative 9. 4 times negative 9 gets me negative 36. And when I add them, there's my negative 5. So now I'll come up and rewrite negative 5 as positive 4 and negative 9. So y squared plus 4y minus 9y minus 36. And again, I'm doing the positive and the negative. Whatever the signs are what you put up here. Okay, factor by grouping. We can factor out of y and get y plus 4. Over here, we pull out the sign. Between 9 and 36, they're factorable by 9. And I'm left with y. Negative 36 divided by negative 9 is positive 4. And they match. So we have y plus 4 times y minus 9. Now, what you need to remember is that we did a substitution, right? So this is not quite our final answer because y is x plus 4. So we have x plus 4 and we have x plus 4 minus 9. So x plus 4 will get us x plus 8. X plus 4 minus 9 will get us x minus 5. So don't forget you have to substitute back in. Okay? Oops, sorry, you couldn't see that. So make sure you go back and substitute because that y right there has to be the x plus 4 parts because that's what we were substituting. All right, and that makes it a little bit easier than multiplying all of that out and then figuring out what your numbers would be.